There is a message hidden inside the way you experience time, not a metaphor, not a spiritual theory, a literal, engineered trap, one that resets every single month, one you walk into without noticing, one that was designed 2,000 years ago to keep you spiritually drained, emotionally reactive, and completely cut off from the divine spark inside you. Jesus knew about it. The Gnostic teachers who preserved his original words described it in detail. And the men who burned those texts at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD worked very hard to make sure you never found out. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to see the 7 traps that the Archons, the Gnostic rulers of the material world, embedded inside the structure of the calendar itself. And more important, you are going to understand exactly how to step around them. But before I show you the first one, I need to explain something that changes the entire picture. You were taught that the calendar is neutral, a tool, just a way of counting days. Your school said that, your church said that. Every planner and scheduling app you have ever used confirmed it, but here is what they left out. The calendar we use today, the Gregorian calendar, was not designed for you. It was designed for an empire, the Roman Empire, and before that, the Julian Reform, and before that, the old Roman calendar, which was intentionally broken, politically manipulated, and used by the ruling class to control planting seasons, religious festivals, tax collection, and military campaigns. Julius Caesar did not fix the calendar because he cared about accuracy. He fixed it because controlling time meant controlling everything that happened inside time. The word calendar itself comes from the Latin calendae, the first day of each Roman month, the day when debts came due, the day the ruling class collected what it was owed. That is what this thing was built for: collection, control, compliance. And here is the part that should make you stop. When early Christian councils, specifically the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, standardized the liturgical calendar, they did not dismantle that Roman structure. They inherited it, baptized it, and made it sacred. The priests and bishops at Nicaea were working inside a Roman political framework. The Emperor Constantine called the council. He presided over it. He wanted a unified religion that would stabilize his empire. So the calendar that organized Christian life was not built on the teachings of Jesus. It was built on the administrative needs of Rome. And the Gnostic manuscripts discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, texts that predate the Nicaean decisions by centuries, describe this exact situation using a specific word: Archons. In Gnostic cosmology, the Archons are not demons in the fantasy novel sense. They are administrators, controllers. The Gnostic Gospel of Philip describes them as entities that feed on human energy, on the emotional states of fear, obligation, and unconscious reaction. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most complete Nag Hammadi texts, names 7 Archons who govern the 7 planes of material existence. 7 governors, 7 traps. And here is what nobody talks about. The calendar has 7 primary cyclical pressure points per year. Once you see where they are, you will not be able to unsee it. The ancient Gnostics called this hidden knowledge by a Greek word, gnosis, direct knowing, not belief, knowing. At the center of that knowing is a single idea: the material world was not created by the highest divine intelligence. It was constructed by a lower intelligence, what the texts call the demiurge, and then administered by the Archons to keep human beings trapped in cycles of unconscious reaction. These cycles are not random. They are built into the rhythms of social life, into financial pressure, into seasonal anxiety, into the way we unconsciously feel certain emotions at predictable times of year and never once stop to ask why. Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, the text that scholar Elaine Pagels at Princeton has called the closest surviving record of his actual teaching style, does not talk about sin and redemption the way the institutional church does. He talks about waking up. The kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. Gospel of Thomas, saying 113. The Archon traps in the calendar exist specifically to make sure you do not see it. Here is what they are. Go back further than Rome. Long before Julius Caesar, long before Constantine, the civilizations of Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon, Akkad were building time structures that mapped human consciousness onto celestial cycles. The Sumerian calendar recognized specific days as energetically charged, not out of superstition, out of multi-generational observation. They noticed that collective events, economic stress, social conflict, unusual illness, emotional volatility, clustered around predictable seasonal moments. Babylonian astronomers catalogued these patterns for over 2,000 years. The ancient Essenes, the Jewish sect that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls, and who many scholars believe influenced the community Jesus taught in, used a solar calendar designed to move in harmony with what they called the appointed times, moments when human consciousness and cosmic rhythm were either aligned or opposed. They built their entire community life around navigating those moments consciously. That was not mysticism. That was the most sophisticated psychological hygiene system of the ancient world. Now, here is where modern science comes in. In 2016, a research team at the University of Toronto published a study in the Journal of Affective Disorders analyzing seasonal mood variation across 1.1 million social media posts. What they found confirmed something psychiatrists had suspected for years. Human emotional reactivity follows predictable seasonal patterns. Not just winter depression, 7 distinct emotional pressure windows distributed across the calendar year. 7 windows, predictable timing, consistent emotional signatures. The ancient observers were right. Now, here is a case that made me stop and reread it twice. In 2014, a behavioral economist at the London School of Economics named Dr. Paul Dolan published research tracking life satisfaction across 12 months for over 10,000 British adults. He was not studying spirituality. He was studying spending, time use, and emotional well-being. What he found was that the lowest average well-being scores across every demographic clustered inside the same 3-month windows year after year. January, October, late December. The same windows the Gnostic calendar map would predict. Dolan wrote that the modern calendar manufactures dissatisfaction in cycles so regular that people accept it as personal failure rather than structural design. Personal failure rather than structural design, that is exactly what the Archon system does. It turns a structural trap into a private shame. You do not say, the calendar is attacking my nervous system. You say, I am bad at January, and the system stays invisible. But somebody knows about this who might surprise you. In 2003, the United States Army Research Institute published a declassified report on what they called temporal stress cycles in military personnel. The report identified 7 annual periods of elevated cognitive error, impaired decision-making, and interpersonal conflict across service branches. The Army's solution was to restrict major operational decisions during those windows and require recalibration protocols, essentially forced stillness and review before acting. The Army called it operational risk management. The Essenes called it preparation for the appointed times. Jesus, in the Gospel of Thomas, called it watching. Different words, same practice, all pointing at the same thing. The calendar is not neutral, and the people who understood that built systems to work with it consciously. When I was building this research out for awakened minds, that convergence, ancient Gnostic maps, modern behavioral economics, declassified military research, all landing in the same place, that is what convinced me this is not a theory. It is a pattern too consistent to ignore. The 7 traps. First, the January compression. The new year begins under maximum external pressure. Financial reset, social performance around resolutions. Your energy goes outward, toward debt, toward image, toward the expectations of others, exactly when the natural cycle calls for inward renewal. The trap is the engineered urgency that prevents you from using January's natural contraction for interior work. Second, the spring escalation. Late March into April, tax season, Easter, a date. Constantine's council fixed to align with the Roman spring festival of Hilaria, a mandatory public celebration of joy that citizens were legally required to observe. The emotional signature here is forced positivity over unresolved anxiety. You are supposed to feel renewed. The bills say otherwise. That conflict drains spiritual energy faster than almost anything else in the year. Third, the summer fragmentation. June and July, vacation pressure, family obligation, social comparison at its annual peak. A 2019 study from the American Psychological Association found that reported stress levels actually increase in June and July for adults with children, directly against the cultural story of summer ease. The trap is the gap between how you are told summer should feel and how it actually feels. Fourth, the back-to-school grief. August into September. Even adults without children in school feel it, a low-grade sense of loss, of time running out, of a door closing. Researchers call it summer's end syndrome. The Gnostic texts describe a form of archonic interference that specifically exploits temporal grief, the suffering that comes not from what is happening, but from your awareness that something good is ending. Fifth, the autumn reckoning. October. Pre-Christian tradition held that the space between living and dead was thinnest now, a period for contemplating ancestors, silence, the facing of mortality. What replaced that? The single most commercially profitable holiday season opener of the year. The trap is distraction at exactly the moment the natural cycle is calling you inward. Sixth, the holiday acceleration, November and December. You have lived this one. The gap between the spiritual depth these weeks carry and the commercial machinery that activates around them creates what psychologists call meaning deprivation under sensory overload. You are too busy to feel what you came here to feel. That is not an accident. Seventh, the year-end audit. The last 2 weeks of December into early January. Did you accomplish enough? Did you earn enough? Are you enough? This window has the highest rates of anxiety, insomnia, and depressive episodes of any 2-week period in the calendar year, according to data published by the National Institute of Mental Health in 2021. 7 traps, 7 windows, 7 moments of maximum interference. Now, let me be direct about why this system exists. Follow the money. Christmas advertising alone accounts for roughly 19% of annual retail sales in the United States, approximately $936 billion in 2023, according to the National Retail Federation. The pharmaceutical industry's highest sales months for antidepressants and sleep aids are January, October, and December. The diet and fitness industry collects 35% of its annual revenue in January. Every single pressure window I just described is a revenue event for industries that depend on your emotional dysregulation, not your peace, your agitation, and here is how they keep it that way. The education system never teaches you that the calendar has a history. Every authority figure in your life is themselves inside the trap, and anyone who points to the structure gets labeled a conspiracy theorist. The moment you say, the calendar was designed to keep you distracted, the reflex is to dismiss you. That reflex was trained. It protects the system. The Church Fathers who dismissed Gnostic texts as heresy, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Epiphanius, were all writing from inside the institutional framework that depended on passive, obligation-driven Christianity. A faith organized around sacraments controlled by priests, around holy days controlled by a calendar, around salvation mediated by an institution. Direct knowing, gnosis, removes the need for the intermediary. That is why they burned the texts. That is why the calendar was standardized the way it was. The Council of Nicaea left records. Constantine left letters. The destruction of Gnostic manuscripts is documented by the same church historians who celebrated it. The evidence was never hidden. It was just never put together this way. I know it is uncomfortable to hear this. There is a specific kind of anger that comes when you realize you have been living inside a system and calling it your own life. But anger alone does not help you. What helps is what comes next. 3 practical steps. First, map the windows in your own life. Get a calendar. Mark the 7 pressure periods. Now go back over the last 2 or 3 years and write down, honestly, how you felt during those periods, what decisions you made, what you regretted, what you argued about. You will see a pattern. Seeing the pattern is the first act of liberation. The Gospel of Thomas is built on this structure. Jesus asks again and again, "Do you see?" Consciousness begins with noticing. Second, use the pre-trap window. The Essenes built a practice of intentional preparation before every major calendar transition, not celebration, silence and inventory, starting 5 to 7 days before each of the 7 windows. Deliberately reduce external stimulation. Less news, less screen time, more time in the body. What you are doing is building your interior signal before the external noise gets loud. The HeartMath Institute has published over 300 studies since 1991, showing that heart rate variability, a direct measure of nervous system coherence, can be consciously increased through specific breathing and awareness practices. When your coherence is high going into a high pressure window, the emotional interference is measurably lower. The science and the ancient practice are pointing at the same thing. Third, and this is the deep work, identify which Archon has the strongest hold on you personally. The 7 archonic patterns described in the Apocryphon of John correspond to 7 emotional triggers: fear of scarcity, need for approval, rage at injustice, grief about loss, compulsive desire, pride about status and inertia. January activates fear of scarcity, spring activates need for approval, summer activates compulsive desire, August activates grief, October activates death anxiety, November and December activate all of them at once. Year-end activates pride and shame simultaneously. Find yours. the one that gets you every year without fail, even when you know it is coming. That is your Archon, not a demon outside you, a pattern inside you that the external calendar has learned to trigger. The practice is not to destroy it. The practice, and this is the Gnostic difference from institutional religion, is to recognize it, to name it, to watch it arise without being swallowed by it. Whoever has come to know the world has found a corpse. Gospel of Thomas saying 56. The corpse is not the world. The corpse is the automatic self that moves through the world without ever waking up. 2,000 years ago, someone said that. They were right then. They are right now. Let us close the loop. You came into this video thinking the calendar was neutral. Now you know it was built by an empire inherited by an institution and turned into the most effective emotional extraction system in human history. You have seen the 7 windows. You have seen who profits from them. You have 3 practical tools. Map your pattern, build a pre-trap buffer, identify your dominant Archon, and you have something more valuable than any of those. You have seen it. That is where freedom starts. That is where it has always started. In the comments below, write the word calendar and tell me which of the 7 traps hits you hardest every year. Is it the January compression, the holiday acceleration, the year-end audit? I read everyone. The most common answer shapes the next video. If this changed the way you see the year, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Not for the channel, for them. This knowledge was suppressed once. The least we can do is refuse to suppress it again. See you in the next one.